I'll start by repeating Bruce. Thanks all for being here and being interested in what's happening in political life in Ohio and in our country. I'm introducing Zack Space, and many of you, especially Father Socrates, probably knows more about him than I do. But just to run through it real quickly, he's a graduate of Kenyon College, got his law degree from Ohio State, and went to work with his father in his law practice. As a consumer lawyer, a public defender, then Dover law director, and then he succeeded, well, the journalistic words begin with embattled, and then imprisoned Bob Ney in representing the 18th. He served there from 2007 to 2011 when the Tea Party wave came in and Bob Gibbs took over the seat, which was then redistricted. And redistricting, I think, is a pretty key interest of Mr. Space. One little note, during the time he was in Congress, he got to be part of the Colbert Report's 435-part series on congressmen, and perhaps presciently, he was asked about his position on guns, the border, and Rosie O'Donnell versus this guy called Donald Trump. It is always interesting to me personally, the people who are running for not the marquee offices, the president, the governorship, because so many of these positions are so important to Ohio. And again, I thank all of you for caring about it enough to come up here, or to come out here, and to welcome Mr. Space and to ask him some tough questions, because that's what the Press Club does. So again, you have cards on your tables. Please write those questions out, and of course we want to hear everything you have to say. And now I introduce Mr. Space.
Thank you, Schultze. I'm Zack Space, candidate for auditor, and the first thing I want to do is urge all of you, actually implore all of you, not to search for the Colbert episode. Seriously, you won't find it. I want to thank the Akron Press Club for the invitation and opportunity to address you today. Forums such as this are a beacon of civil discourse, substantive political discussions, something that our country desperately needs right now. And it also serves as a powerful reminder of the enduring strength of the First Amendment and of a free and open press, both essential to a vibrant democracy. So just a word about my background. I worked as a small-town lawyer for most of my career down in Dover, Ohio, Tuscarawas County, just to the south of here. I fell into politics, really, when Bob Ney committed those mistakes which caused him to be embattled and then imprisoned. After leaving politics in 2010, the wake of the Tea Party movement, I left disillusioned and disappointed in the process. I went back to work in the private sector after leaving Congress and thought that I was done with politics for the rest of my life. But then something happened to me. I came to the realization that our government was broken, and the reason for that is that our political process is broken. I have my father, Socrates, that Schultze pointed out with me back there in the back. Dad, just wave to us. Can you wave? Yep, here's Sock. Sock is with me often. He's 87 years old. He's a Korean War veteran, a proud Marine to this day. And I want to tell you a story about my dad. He grew up in an immigrant family in Dover. He was born on the cusp of the Great Depression, 1930, into a poor family in a depressed town during the Great Depression. And the story of my father wouldn't be complete without telling a little bit about his father, my namesake. They called him Jack. He came from Greece, a small little island in the Aegean Sea. Beautiful place, really. He came over here as a young man and earned his citizenship in World War I, sworn in as an American citizen on an army base in France, and suffered a lifetime, endured a lifetime of hardship and poverty. He worked in coal mines and in steel mills the best he could. He was hampered by a disability occasion through his service in the war, where he was gassed. And he did what he could do to support this big, loving family under very difficult circumstances. And one day my father asked my grandfather, "Why would you leave this beautiful island in this beautiful place in the world to come over here, work in the coal mines?" Imagine what it was like to work in coal mines in the 1920s. And endure this life of poverty. And my grandfather, called Papu, he answered. He came from, by the way, this island in the Aegean was under Ottoman control when he came over here. And the answer that he gave my father, why would you leave? Why did you do this? Why did you come here? You left your parents. He never saw his parents again when he left. His siblings. The answer was very brief. 2 words. It was for you. See, my grandfather, like many of our forefathers, recognized something about this country that was special. He, like so many immigrants throughout the history of our great nation, people who came here sought opportunity. They sought to be a part of something bigger than themselves. My grandfather came here. He came to this country because he wanted to live in a place where every vote mattered, because everyone mattered. And here we are, over 100 years later. And I think it's about time we have an honest conversation about what's happening to this democracy that has become a beacon for the world. I contend, and this is why I'm running, that democracy has been compromised. It has been perverted by the influence of money and political greed. And allow me to elaborate. As a former member of Congress, I can speak with authority on this issue. To get to Congress and to stay in Congress, you have to raise a lot of money. Can't win without money. Money has become a central component of the political process in this country. In fact, maybe the most important component of the political process. And bad things happen in a democracy where money becomes so important to success. The first thing is, it's a colossal waste of your legislators or your president's time, or your governor, or your treasurer, or your secretary of state, or your attorney general, or your auditor. It's a colossal waste of our time. We should be governing, not calling strangers hours on end. That is a reality of this industry, the industry of politics. You have to spend time raising money, or you don't succeed, period. Number 2, what's worse is that money influences policy. It subjectifies what should be an objective process, and it impacts almost every member of Congress and almost every member of the General Assembly to some degree. It has no business being a factor in how policy is created, but it is. And third, and this is even worse, it gives people a reason not to believe in this democracy. So that when Donald Trump stands up in front of America and crows that the system is rigged, he's right. It is. Your auditor can't change campaign finance laws, but he or she can do something about this. If you look to Columbus, you don't have to look far to find examples of the influence of money in the creation of policy. Exhibit A is what's happened with ECOT, which is the poster child for corruption among for-profit charter schools in Ohio. This school has taken $1 billion away from public education, our tax money, shoveled hundreds of millions of dollars into private for-profit management companies, over which we as taxpayers have no right to see, produced abysmal results, graduation rates of less than 40%, average daily attendance rates of less than 30%, and enriching its founder to the point where he has a $1 million home in Columbus or Upper Arlington, a $500,000 condo in Columbus, a $400,000 lake home in Noble County, a $4 million mansion in Florida, all with our money, not our money, public school money. How does this happen? It happens because he happens to be one of the largest single contributors to the General Assembly in the state of Ohio. Your democracy is bought and paid for, and there are examples all around us. So whether it's for-profit charter schools, payday lenders, private prisons, the list goes on and on. It has to stop. The auditor could have and should have stopped the ECOT madness in its tracks by declaring those books unauditable when hundreds of millions of dollars were pumped into for-profit management companies without any oversight. The auditor can make a difference on this issue. The auditor can make a difference on another issue, another way that your democracy has been compromised. The sources of that compromise lie in political greed. And that manifests itself most pointedly every 10 years after the census when they get together to redraw congressional lines and state legislative district lines. So here you have a somewhat arcane constitutional provision that is designed simply to accommodate for the growing, changing population in a representational democracy, being turned into the most powerful of political weapons. The only consideration that has gone into how these lines have been drawn now for the last 3 census cycles is how can one party obtain partisan advantage over the other with utter disregard of the consequences. And the consequences are serious. We have seen the disenfranchisement of millions of Ohioans. When legislators pick their voters, voters are not picking their legislators. We have seen Ohio divided. This process empowers the extremes in both parties, and it renders the middle of the political spectrum chronically under or unrepresented. Because the only real political vulnerability that most members of both Congress and the General Assembly have, absent a wave year, is in their primary. If you're a Republican in one of these hyper-partisanized Republican districts, you are most vulnerable if someone gets to your right and beats you in a primary. Likewise, if you're one of those Democrats in those few Democratic districts that have, by definition, become hyper-partisanized, you too are only vulnerable in your primary if someone gets to your left. This causes both parties to move to the extremes, again, rendering the middle of the political spectrum, where most Ohioans find themselves, by the way, unrepresented. And it renders government dysfunctional. You don't have to look very far to find examples of that either. We can't even talk to each other because we're afraid of what it might mean to our bases. So here, too, we have a democracy compromised. In a process which, once again, affords ample reason for the people of this hot state not to believe in the process. So when people lose faith in their democratic process, they naturally turn toward authoritarian figures. And we're seeing this. This has to stop. This, too, has to stop. The auditor sits on the redistricting commission. I will be at the table, if I'm elected, after the 2020 census. And I am a proud Democrat. My father taught me what it means to be a Democrat, but I will not be representing the Democratic Party at that table. Regardless of who's on that commission with me, I will do everything in my power to ensure as many competitive districts as possible. Doubling down on the mistakes of our past will not solve our problems. And finally, the auditor's office is relevant in another way that in the past has not been fully utilized, at least in my opinion. The performance audit powers of the office are such that the auditor can make meaningful reform and change in areas that matter. By way of example, think to yourself for just a moment, what's the most compelling problem that we as Ohioans face today? Think about that just for a moment to yourself. I'm wondering how many of you are thinking about what I'm thinking about, and that is this opioid scourge is wrecking our communities. Whatever it is the state of Ohio is doing to help solve this problem is not working. We are spending hundreds of millions of dollars. 17,000 Ohioans have died from opioid overdoses since 2010. That number continues to increase exponentially. I intend to use the performance powers of this office to audit Medicaid, specifically with respect to what it's doing, what it's spending, what resources we're using to combat this problem, and assess and measure what's effective and what's not, which would be the first step in the creation of a comprehensive plan to deal with this crisis. In fact, every constitutional office should be bringing the full powers of their offices to bear in dealing with this problem. So, as a proud Democrat, I am a believer in the concept that many of us refer to as social justice. And as I think of that term, I think of things like justice when it comes to access to public education, justice when it comes to access to quality health care, opportunity, racial justice, gender justice, all these things that we strive for. None of it happens. None of it until we obtain a form of political justice that restores those basic and fundamental principles of democracy that people like my grandfather risked everything for. Now is the time to reclaim this democracy, and this is why I'm running. So, I know that was a very general 30,000-foot perspective, and I am eager to try to answer some of the more granular questions you may have now.